Hello, my friends. In this video, we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and G25 results of a Yamna sample from Kalmykia. It is labeled as Yamna from Kalmykia, but based on the location of the sample, it actually seems to be Yamna from Rostovskaya Oblast, because if you look at the border location, this looks like it falls into Rostovskaya Oblast rather than Kalmykia, which is a little bit to the east. So it's interesting that they labeled it as Yamna from Kalmykia, but I guess it's a little difference in location, so it makes sense, I guess. But it is technically Yamna from Rostovskaya Oblast and not from Kalmykia, which I find interesting. At least if we go by the location that is given here on the spreadsheet of copy of ancient DNA 2.07.40. Now, the mitochondrial haplogroup for this sample is T2A1, and the Y DNA for this sample is R1b, which is a very Western European lineage. Actually, the more precise subclade of R1b, we can probably find that out here. It is R1b1A2A2, and the subclade in terms that you would be given in YSEC clade finder is Z2106. So Z2106, in case you know much more about this subclade, maybe you can leave that in the comments. I don't really know much about the Z2106 subclade, where it's commonly found in. It is interesting that this sample did not score the L51 or L, I think it's L51 subclade on my trait predictor. So perhaps it doesn't have the L51 subclade, but it might also be because of lack of coverage. So we don't really know that for sure. But we do know that this sample has R1b haplogroup, which is common and typical for Western Europeans nowadays. And Western Europeans do have haplogroups that ultimately trace back to the steppe. So having this haplogroup is very indicative of steppe ancestry. Now, in terms of the G25 results, this sample is closest to various Eastern Europeans and people of the West Asia and Middle East. So you can see the closest samples at distance 0.12, almost 0.13 are Finnish, Ingrians, Russians, Mordvins, Moksha, and just at about the same distance but slightly higher distance are Pamiri and Akhwakh and various Middle Eastern people. So you can see Pamiri come at a distance of 0.13, and Akhwakh come at a distance at 0.13, which is about as high a distance as Finnish at 0.12. So really, even though all the closest populations are technically populations of Eastern Europe, the populations of Caucasus and West Asia come at a relatively close distance as the populations of Europe as well. Because 0.13 versus 0.12, it's a relatively small difference. We can put max output number to 50 and see what other groups will show up at a further distance. So we see after Akhwakh is Estonians and Darginians, so it's relatively equal distance to Estonians as Darginians. Then it's Kaitag and Norwegians, so relatively close, equal distance to Kaitag and Norwegians. Kaitag are population in the Caucasus. Then it's Avars and Andan, Andean B. Andean, I believe, are population of native to the United States. So that's very interesting. Actually, not the United States, but native to South America. So that's very surprising that they score relatively close to this population. Then Pamiri from Shugnan. Then there is Tatar Mishar. Then there is Kubachinian, which is in Dagestan, I believe. Then there is Kazakh, Ukrainian, Russian, Voronezh. So there is a mixture of populations of the Caucasus, populations of West Asia, and populations of Eastern Europe in these closest sample results. Now let's run the single mode mixture, and the single mode mixture gives out this result, where essentially this sample can be modeled as a mixture of 54% Finnish East plus 30% Darginian plus 15.2% Kalash. So the sample can be modeled as a mixture of essentially half Finnish, then 30.4% Dargin, which is a population of Eastern Caucasus, then 15% Kalash, which is a population of Pakistan. So it's not identical to modern Finnish people. It's not identical to modern Eastern Europeans. It is quite different from modern Eastern Europeans autosomally. Is the point I'm trying to make here. Yamnaya in reality are a mixture of Eastern hunter-gatherers with Caucasian hunter-gatherers. They have a little bit of European farmer admixture that they picked up from, I think, a Tripilia culture, but they are mostly a mixture of Eastern hunter-gatherers with Caucasus or some kind of population that existed in the Pontic-Caspian steppe that is similar to the Caucasus hunter-gatherers. So scoring like this, it simply reflects that it simply reflects not so much even the Middle Eastern ancestry in Yamna, more so it reflects the European drift that occurred in Finns and populations of Eastern Europe that made them more different from Yamna, made them shift in a different direction from Yamna, more so towards the um, cluster where modern Europeans fall into. So this results with G25, where modern Eastern Europeans shift so much further from Yamna and more towards, the cluster where modern Europeans fall into. That shows that it is the Europeans who diverged from Yamna. It is the Europeans who diverged from all these populations of the Middle East and exotic populations. And Europeans became more white as time went on. Essentially, it is the Europeans who changed, and it is not Yamna who is exotic. It is the Europeans who became more white as time went on. And this, by the way, is a pattern you will see with any ethnicity calculator from any PCA-based ethnicity calculator from G25 to Eurogenski 13 to any calculator on GED match. You will see that various Yamnans and various populations of steppe, in Neolithic, steppe, Bronze Age origin score a lot of West Asian and exotic components, such as, for example, with Eurogenski 13, Yamnaya Kalmykia, this sample scores 25.95% West Asian and 6% South Asian. Now, with the Oracle, the sample is getting modeled as a mixture of Estonian plus Tabasaran for the closest mixture, half Estonian plus half Tabasaran. We know through robust admixture tools that Europeans and Eastern Europeans in particular have about half admixture from Yamnans, including Yamnans from Kalmykia, which scores similarly to Yamnans from Sarmara and other Yamnans from other places. Now, if if Europeans have about half ancestry from Yamna, in very simple terms, that would mean that Europeans should be scoring around 12.5% West Asian on these calculators on Eurogenski 15, but that's not the case. Europeans don't score 12.5% West Asian on Eurogenski 13. Eastern Europeans don't score that much West Asian. Eastern Europeans score maybe 5 or 6% West Asian in the average. I score like 5%. Some people score higher, some people score lower. But in general, Eastern Europeans score around 5% West Asian on Eurogenski 13. And same goes for Western Europeans. They also score around 5, sometimes lower, especially people on French or Spanish descent, they score lower of West Asian descent. But these people all have Yamna ancestry, which scores so much West Asian on these calculators. So where did all this West Asian ancestry go to? If Yamnans have it, but modern Europeans who descend from Yamna don't have it, where did all of it go to? And the thing is, it all exists still. All of this West Asian ancestry exists still in Europeans, but we no longer express it because we went through genetic drift that goes against all this West Asian ancestry. We drifted away from West Asians and we drifted toward being whiter. We drifted toward being more European, and we drifted away from West Asia. That's why with these calculators that are capturing our modern European genetic drift, they are capturing modern components which are based on modern Europeans. And because we are drifted towards these modern components, we are drifted away from the West Asian stuff that is present in ancient Europeans. I hope I did a good job explaining that. Now let's look at the results of Vasily with my Nashakot tool and see what he scores in terms of Nashakot, what he looks like. This is the Yamna sample we are analyzing today. So it looks like he has brown eye color at a 68% likelihood of odds. So he's quite dark in terms of eye color. Although he doesn't score darkest brown eyes, he only scores brown eyes. So he isn't the darkest you can be in terms of eye color. For hair color, he is scoring black hair at 84% likelihood of odds. So he's quite dark in terms of hair color as well. And for skin color, he is scoring olive or light brown skin. Olive at 56%, light brown at 41.9%. And for hair texture, he is scoring curly or wavy hair. And for nose shape, he is scoring more likely Greek-shaped nose than snub-shaped nose. So he's scoring rather a Greek nose shape. So longer aquiline and narrower nose shape. For coloring related variants found in the file, Looks like he does not have any of the blue eye variants in these variations of character, which is a very big reveal. It is unusual for Europeans to have this type of genotype here. He does not have blue haplotype 3 or blue haplotype 2. No genotype for blue haplotype 1, unfortunately, so we can't determine whether he has blue haplotype 1 or not. But no BEH2 or BEH3, which means he definitely has some sort of darker eye color. He does have two light color variants here in SLC24A5, which is really good, so lighter pigmentation of skin, eyes, and hair, mostly skin. And no light color variants in this variation of SLC45A2. So that's darker pigmentation of hair, mostly hair, but also eyes and skin. He does have this genotype in kettle G, which is really very interesting. So this genotype in kettle G contributes to lighter pigmentation of hair, mostly hair. I believe it also affects skin and a little bit eyes, but I don't think it does in my algorithm. I'd have to check the code. I don't remember. But it mostly affects the pigmentation of hair. And it is one of the variants that back in like 2010 was linked to blonde hair and was used to claim that ancient North Eurasians, namely Afontalgara-3, had blonde hair. But in reality, this variant is pretty insignificant. These having two variants here is not gonna make you blonde, or one variant or two. It's not gonna make you blonde if the rest of your genotype is like this. And this individual, as you can see, has two variants here, and he is very far from blonde. And it does affect the score, actually, for hair color. It does affect the score, but despite that, he is not blonde. But he does have two light color variants here. He's homozygous for this, and that's really rare, actually. That's really uncommon. So he does have these two blonde color variants in this variation of Keto G. So there you go. That's very uncommon, but it doesn't mean much in terms of its effect on phenotype. And no genotypes in MC1R region, so no predisposition to being ginger. All right. Let's look at the phenotype oracle. So in the phenotype oracle, the closest phenotypes to him are this, which is a palmyrid phenotype, followed by this, which is also a palmyrid phenotype, followed by this, which is a alpinid phenotype. This is exactly what I imagine the Yamna looking like. So I think that's pretty spot on. And the two-way mixtures is a mixture of looks like Basket plus South Asian plus Basket. By the way, keep in mind, just because it's a Basket phenotype doesn't mean it's something that's like Anatolian farmer plus Western together. No, it's a phenotype that's presently found in populations of the Caucasus and populations of Middle East. This is a phenotype. It's not linked to a specific ethnicity. It's just a look that you can find in many different populations. And I think that this particular look is even more commonly found in populations of the Caucasus than it is among the Basques. But I just call it Basket because that's its name apparently. So it's Basket plus South Asian. It's once again South Asian plus Basket, whatever that means. It's Palmyrid plus Palmyrid. Palmyrid is named correctly, appropriately. Although in reality, I would say that this phenotype right here looks more Hispanic to me even than Palmyrid. This looks more like, I don't know, like Honduras or something, like fella from Honduras. And this also looks kind of Hispanic, actually. Yeah, so these both kind of look Hispanic to me. So this fella, Palmyrid plus Palmyrid, Palmyrid plus Alpinid, and then it's this fella is Basket plus Palmyrid. So these are the two-way admixture models for this sample's admixture of phenotypes, and the closest. They're all pretty similar in terms of distance, but this is the closest distance. The closest distance is a mixture of Basket plus South Asian. So this is, I guess, the closest mixture for what the sample might look like. Let's close the two-way admixture model, and let's look at the biomarkers results for this sample. So for the biomarkers, this sample has got higher odds of vitamin D, higher levels of vitamin D, which is pretty good. Lower levels of LDL cholesterol, which is really good. Slightly lower levels of HDL cholesterol, which is kind of bad, but it's okay because it comes together with a really lower levels of LDL cholesterol, which is good. Lower levels of glucose, which is kind of good. Average levels of hemoglobin, slightly above average blood pressure, which is okay. Slightly below average level of iron in the blood. Slightly below average level of sex hormone violent globulin in the blood. Slightly below average level of red blood cell count in blood. Slightly below average number of base pairs for telomere length, so slightly below average predisposition to lifespan, lower lifespan, and below average height. This is actually the exact same predisposition to height that I score, below 0.222 centimeters for the average height for his height and gender. So I scored the same exact thing for expected height, and I am 6 foot. So this sample might also be 6 foot. You know, take that at face value. This sample might also be 6 foot based on this result, and this is pretty average. It's a pretty average score, but it's a slight predisposition to being below average, and I have the same score, and I am 6 foot tall. So there you go. Let's look at the polygenic risk scores, and we are going to ignore everything that's really far, that's really close to 1. We are only going to look at stuff that's really distant from 1, stuff that is very below average or very high, very above average. So he's got a below averages for kidney stones, a very below averages for arrhythmia and nodosum, below averages for hemoglobin E disease, really good, a below averages for migraine, a slightly above averages for lupus, a slightly above averages for gout, a slightly above averages for eczema. He's got a below averages for polycystic ovary syndrome. He's got high odds for cataracts, which is very interesting. He's got very high odds for AMD. So age-related macular degeneration is a concern for this sample. But I'm not gonna put that in the thumbnail because that's lame. It's way too hard to write and it's way too long, so that's not thumbnail worthy. He's got high score for rheumatoid arthritis. He's got low score for Tourette's. He's got high score for epilepsy. He's got average for asthma. Slightly high score for leukemia. Wow, that's interesting. He's got slightly high score for vitiligo. He's got slightly higher score for myopia. He's got slightly lower score for corneal astigmatism. He's got slightly lower score for primary biliary cirrhosis. He's got slightly lower score for stroke, which is really good. He's got slightly higher score for male pattern hair loss, which is not surprising because Europeans and people of European descent generally score higher for male pattern hair loss with my tool. He's got average odds for atrial fibrillation. He's got slightly below average odds for deep vein thrombosis. He's got very low odds for cardiovascular issues, which is really interesting. So they're really low odds for cardiovascular issues, which is really interesting. Very, very interesting. Lower odds for ADHD. Slightly above average odds for unipolar depression. Slightly below average odds for bipolar type 1, and low odds for schizophrenia. Good. He's got higher odds of type 2 diabetes and lower odds of type 1 diabetes, and very high score for Alzheimer's. So let's look up Alzheimer's actually. Does he have variants in APOE? Does he have risk variants for that in APOE? He's got 2 APOE alleles in this variation of APOE gene, and much higher odds of Alzheimer's because of that. But looks like the other genotypes lead to decreased risk of Alzheimer's. But he does have one genotype which is two APOE alleles in APOE. So because of that, he's scoring much higher for the risk of Alzheimer's. That's very interesting. I might put that in the thumbnail, that he's predisposed to Alzheimer's based on the genotype in APOE. So this might go in the thumbnail. He's got lower than average score for multiple sclerosis, very low score for MS. No risk variance for breast cancer, really good. High score for prostate cancer, a low score for glioma, low score for thyroid cancer, no JAK2 variants for blood cancers such as polycythemia vera. By the way, that is the cancer that Boogie2988 faked for YouTube Cloud, and I added it because of that. Actually, because of that whole YouTube drama, I decided to add this to my trait predictor. He's got 3 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 16, and he's got this genotype in KTLG, which is very typical for Europeans. So that's kind of a typical genotype for Europeans to have this homozygous risk genotype in KTLG. Once again, I've said this in all my videos previously. All Europeans have pretty much all Europeans, with some minor exceptions, all Europeans have a predisposition to testicular cancer, but not all Europeans develop the condition. So this type of genotype is not anything to be concerned about, to be honest. In all grand likelihood of things, this is not something to be concerned about. One risk variant for celiac disease out of 8, pretty typical here. And we see 2 risk variants for Crohn's, which is these are not marked as important, so it's not that big of a deal. And do we see anything else? We see 1 risk variant for basal cell carcinoma, which is very interesting. This might be a miscall, but it might also be a genuine call for basal cell carcinoma. And we don't see any other uncommon risk variants anywhere else. Yep, so it's pretty good result. Let's go over the monogenic traits. So for now, we remember that he's got a predisposition to age-related macular degeneration and Alzheimer's. Those are the big 2 things that we remember. Age-related macular degeneration is very hard to make content out of because it's well, it's kind of difficult to explain what that is. It's an eye problem, and also it's the score. It is very easy to score very high on it, but the Alzheimer's concern, it's very easy, and it's just one word. It's easy to put in a thumbnail. You just write Alzheimer's in a thumbnail, and it instantly draws people in. So Alzheimer's is probably going to go in the thumbnail of this video. So he's scoring Warrior for Warrior versus Warrior panel. He's scoring definitely much more of a Warrior result, which is typical for Europeans to score more of a Warrior. And he's actually scoring Warrior despite having GG in Comet's Valmet variation. So despite this genotype in Comet's Valmet, he's scoring Warrior still because of all the other genotypes, which lead to Warrior traits. Well, he's got this genotype in MAOA, which is a Warrior genotype. This genotype in MAOB, which also I think is a warrior genotype as well. So he's got all these warrior genotypes, which are warrior genotypes in MAOA and MAOB. So overall, his result is more of a warrior result. For DRD2, he is scoring intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, so intermediate odds for such conditions as bipolar and schizophrenia. That takes into account no-go learner, this genotype, which is linked to no-go learner as well. Is there TAC1 in this result? There is no TAC1 genotype, so this sample does not have a genotype for TAC1 in the file. TAC1 is not in the file, unfortunately. And for serotonin, he is scoring lower or intermediate levels of 5-HT serotonin, so slight predisposition to such conditions as anxiety and depression. I remember he was scoring slightly above average for depression, actually, so anxiety and depression makes sense. For autism, he is scoring higher for the odds of autism, so there is some predisposition to autism. For lactose persistence, he is scoring higher odds of lactose intolerance. He actually does not have any variants for lactose persistence, not European variants, not the Arab variants, not the worldwide variants. He does not have any variants for European lactose persistence, and he is scoring the score that he scores. This is the score that you get if you don't have any variants for lactose persistence whatsoever. So if you don't have any variants for lactose persistence, but you have all the four SNPs found in your file, this is what you're going to score. So this is very good to observe what you're going to score. This is like the basal score for not having any variants for lactose persistence. For empathy gene, he is scoring lower level of empathy based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 SNPs for OXTR. Based on these 5 SNPs, he is scoring a lower level of empathy. Okay. Hemochromatosis, no risk variance for that. Well, it makes sense because we went over that. He didn't have higher levels of iron in biomarkers panel. So because of that, we can sort of assume that he doesn't have any hemochromatosis variants. Because if he had any hemochromatosis variants, he would have higher levels of iron in the biomarkers panel. No risk variance for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene, which is really good to see. And we do see the APOE alleles for Alzheimer's. Very unfortunate. He is scoring intermediate odds for cardiovascular issues. Wow! So he's actually scoring intermediate for cardiovascular issues. So because of that, we have to assume that his results for the homocysteine panel have to be really good. The homocysteine results have to be really, really good, which means we have to assume that the MTHFR results have to be really good as well. There have to be no risk variance in MTHFR for folate metabolism issues. And we also have to assume that he doesn't have any risk variance for homocystinuria, and we also have to assume that the CBS panel has to be good as well. So from looking at these two panels and their results, we can make these three assumptions, and they're probably right. So watch me go over the results, and these three assumptions are going to be proven right because it's a mathematical calculation. They have to be proven right because this panel is intermediate odds, and the polygenic risk score panel for cardiovascular issues panel is very below average. So it has to be right, what I just said. It has to be right. So he has to have a very low score for homocysteine panel. And because of that, he has to have good genotypes in the MTHFR panel. And because of that, he also has to have no risk variants for homocystinuria. And because of that, he also has to have really good genotypes in the CBS gene, because all of these traits are interconnected together in the calculation process. So all of these traits have to be proven right. All of these statements will be proven right in a couple seconds. We'll get to it right now. Okay, so for facial morphology panel, he's got European traits in EDAR, European genotypes in EDAR, typical European stuff. Nose pointing up in DCHS2. He's got lower odds of missing teeth, and he's got 2 genotypes for slightly thinner eyebrows. All right. He's got 1 variant for slightly above average risk of vitiligo and HLA gene. So HLA genotype. I think HLA genotype will be good because if we scroll back to diabetes, um, if we scroll back to diabetes, there's this genotype which is to 7-fold decrease in type 1 diabetes, and he scored pretty low for type 1 diabetes actually. So HLA genotype is probably going to be pretty good. I don't expect HLA genotype to be bad at all for this sample. For miscellaneous section, no micropenis, really good to see. Impaired muscle performance, likely endurance athlete, which is very interesting. So this has to do with like strength or power athlete versus endurance athlete. And then there is the likely having photic sneeze reflex, which is very interesting. He has no risk variance for pain and hypersensitivity out of 10 total. And his risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications is very much higher than average, 1.9 times the average, which is very high. Very interesting. I've actually taken beta blocker medications in the past before. I've taken them to combat a different health problem that I had. And I do also score very high for risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications. But thankfully, I never experienced that. Well, I'm still alive, so thanks for that. But it's very interesting, and I'm glad that I included that report in the result here. Okay. He does have a risk variant for familiar Mediterranean fever, which is very interesting. It's kind of unusual that he does, because familiar Mediterranean fever is a very Mediterranean Mediterranean disease to have. It's typically afflicting Jews, Greeks, Turks, and this individual is Yamna from Russia. Now, for MTHFR panel, exactly what I was expecting. Lower odds of various health issues. The genotype MTHFR is really good MTHFR genotype, lower odds of various health issues. And now let's see if the other 2 things that I prophesized will be good as well, because I did not look at the sample beforehand. I never look at my samples beforehand. Little fun fact. I always record my first time impression of the samples whenever I go over them. I never look at them beforehand. Never. It's always my first time impression. So we're going to look at the CBS panel, and we're going to look at the homocystinuria results, and we're going to find out, was I right? Does this sample really not have any risk variance for homocystinuria? And does this sample really have good genotypes in the CBS panel? I assume that he does, and I think he will. Lower odds of epithelial cancers. And what about leukemia? I remember he was scoring high for leukemia. So he's got 1 NQ01 allele, which leads to higher odds of leukemia. And he's got this genotype 2, which leads to higher odds for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So this individual has definitely some predisposition to leukemia. For the 8Q24, there's only 3 genotypes here, but they are pretty good. Only 3 genotypes, but they're pretty good. Okay. For rare diseases and traits panel, looks like higher odds of rheumatoid arthritis, or RA. And that looks like that's pretty much it. There is no other conditions that he's predisposed to. It's just rheumatoid arthritis. I don't see anything else. No risk variance for celiac disease and HLA, which is really good to see. For allergies panel, nickel likely causes an allergic skin reaction. This is a very interesting SNP. I added this a couple months back. So there is basically an SNP that determines whether or not nickel causes a allergic reaction for you. And some people have it. It basically turns off the allergic reaction to nickel. And some people have it, some people don't. Okay, for APOB gene panel, he's got 0 APOB risk variance for familial hypercholesterol out of 6 total, pretty good. So no predisposition to high lipids levels. But this does not affect any other panel on the results, so it's not that big of a deal. For Canavan syndrome, no risk variance for that. For HIV and AIDS panel, looks like he's got no protective variants from HIV and HLA-C, which is typical genotype for people. And for HLA gene panel, he is scoring lower odds of autoimmune disease. If we check HLA genotypes right now, we will see what contributed to this result. So actually, what's interesting is the HLA-A result is quite bad, which leads to 26% odds of carbamazepine hypersensitivity. This is a bad result. So HLA-A result definitely messed up the sample's results for HLA gene panel quite significantly. And this is very uncommon as well. So this genotype in HLA-A is very, very unusual and uncommon. HLA-B is looking pretty good. HLA-C is looking pretty good here, but this genotype in HLA-C, which leads to slightly higher odds of, well, slightly lower protection from HIV is bad, I guess, but it's very typical. This is the most typical genotype for humans, so there is nothing to say about that. And for HLA-D, looks like everything is pretty good except for this one genotype, which is slightly higher odds for vitiligo, and everything else is looking pretty good, except for this genotype, which is to slightly lower levels of antibodies. So I guess except for this lower levels of antibodies, and this genotype for high risk of vitiligo, and this genotype in HLA-A, which leads to odds of carbamazepine hypersensitivity, which is very rare. Aside from these three genotypes, the sample has really good stuff, really good genotypes in the HLA gene. All right, now we're getting to the CBS panel, and the CBS panel is exactly as I was expecting. Lowest homocysteine levels here, lowest here, and he does have one genotype that leads to higher levels of plasma homocysteine, but this has a relatively small contribution in the CBS panel, and also no risk variance for homocystinuria, exactly as what I was saying, and really good results for homocysteine levels, as I was saying, lower homocysteine levels predicted at 52.6%, as I was saying, exactly as I was saying. So it really goes to show you that if you know how this program works, you can estimate, you can look at one part of the result, and you can already assume what the other part looks like. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, no risk variance for anything here, no risk variance for ADL. For color blindness panel, no risk variance for color blindness in OPN1SW, no risk variance in OPN1 or OPN1LW either. For FTO gene panel, he's scoring intermediate or higher odds of obesity, which is very interesting. I don't often see that score. I don't often see people scoring that intermediate or higher odds of obesity. That is based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 SNPs. That is because he is homozygous for fat gene variants in these two SNPs, and looks like for this SNP as well. So he's homozygous for fat gene variants in a lot of SNPs. Wow, interesting. For syncope panel, based on 5 SNPs, he's got below average odds for syncope, which is very good. And he's got 2 copies of the quote-unquote hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant, which leads to reduced ability to process carbs and sugars. Very, very cool. For blood group panel, his blood type is most likely type B or AB. Wow! This is very, very unusual. I don't often see blood types that are B or AB. And it's actually kind of difficult to determine whether it's B or AB exactly. So in this case, it is most likely AB actually. If you look at the genotypes, it says possibly blood type B or AB, likely blood type AB, probably blood type AB, slightly lower odds of B and O blood types. So yes, in this case, the blood type is most likely actually AB. There is just not enough variance to more accurately determine it, but it is most likely blood type AB for this sample, not B. So I think it looks like my trait predictor did a little bit of a miscalculation here, and determined 53.3% odds for B, but it's really AB. Well, there you go. This sample has got AB blood type. Very interesting sample. I will probably do more Yamna samples later on. I will not be making them like in a row, sample after sample, but I will be making more samples from Yamna culture with my trait predictor. I will definitely be covering them in the future. By the way, I hosted my trait predictor online. You can actually visit my site, and you can upload your files on my trait predictor website. On this website, which will be in the description of the video. Check out the description of the video. This is only going to cost you $3.85. What is actually super cool about this website and the way I've set it up is that, well, first let me show you what you do. You go to my website, you see my email here, my email duskycomputer@gmail.com, or my phone number 15612292972, and you send me $3.85 by PayPal. You can use my phone number or you can use my email to send me that money. Do not use my legal name to send me that money, because there are other people with my legal name, and most likely you will send money to those other people instead of me. So use my email, which only I have, or my phone number, which only I have. These are unique identifiers that only I have. So use my email or my phone number to send me money by PayPal. and that's $3.85, which is cheaper than my previous offers. It is cheaper than any other service online for DNA testing and DNA traits and health predictions. It is the cheapest service you will find anywhere. Now, after you send me that money, you go and you open my form, this form right here. You enter your email address for report sending. Make sure you enter it without without any errors. Make sure you enter it well, and you enter it um, without any errors. Just double check it, okay? Then you upload image proof of PayPal payment. So you take a screenshot of the payment after you sent it. In the screenshot, write a timestamp of when it happened, when the payment went through, and also in the screenshot, you don't have to write the timestamp. On one hand, you don't have to write the timestamp. Timestamp is not that essential. You don't have to write the timestamp, but you do have to write your name on the screenshot. That would be very much helpful. If you wrote your name on the screenshot of when you sent the payment, that would be very much helpful, because that would help me track the payment, who sent it, and who the payment came from. That would be very helpful if you did that. And here you upload your text file, no more than 50 megabytes. So if you have an ancestry file, that would be around 20 megabytes. You have a MyHeritage file, that would be around 20 megabytes. If you have a 23andMe file, that'd be around 15 megabytes. So that fits in the 20 megabyte quota. So you add a text file here, and you click upload, and all that gets sent to my server. Your email address, your PayPal proof of payment, your image, and your text file, all that gets sent to my server. And then I will have a script that runs your file through my trait predictor executable, and I have a script that will also send you your DNA results to your email. It would probably get sent to your spam folder, but it will get sent to your email that you use for report sending. So your results will get sent to your email. And by the way, what's really cool about the server setup that I'm making here is that I will be able to send you your updates. But any update that I make with the Trait Predictor, new versions, probably not like little subversions like 15.1, 15.2, but every time I make a new, like straight up new version, like version 16 comes out, I will be able to update your results and send you your updated results by email, by the email that you used when you filled out this data sheet, which is really cool. So you'll get your updates by email, and this is something that's only going to cost you $3.85. So I think it's a really cool system that I've set up here, and make sure you check it out. It will be in the description of the video. And thanks for watching my video. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe in case this is the first video you watch from my channel, and goodbye.